The August air in Yanaka was a thick, wet blanket, smelling of damp earth from the nearby cemetery and the sweet rot of overripe fruit from a grocer's stall. Kaido Tanaka despised the humidity. It clung to the silk of his shirt and felt like a weakness, a surrender to the elements. He walked alone, a deliberate act of anonymity in a life that afforded him none. His men were ghosts in the periphery, 2 blocks in every direction, but here, on this quiet street of low-slung wooden houses and tiny shops, he was just a man in a brutally sharp suit, his solitude a weapon. Then he saw her. 3 years, for months, and 11 days had evaporated in the space of a single, shattering heartbeat. Naomi. She was crossing the street, a portfolio case clutched in one hand, her other brushing a stray curl from her temple. The gesture was so familiar it was a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. She wore a simple linen dress, the color of burnt orange, and sandals. Nothing like the tailored armor he had dressed her in. Nothing of his world. She looked peaceful. The thought was a shard of glass in his gut. He stopped, a statue of imported wool and controlled violence amidst the flow of pedestrians. The world narrowed to the line of her back, the confident stride he had once owned. She disappeared into a narrow doorway, above which a simple sign read Kintsugi Atelier, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The irony was so bitter it tasted like blood. He did not move for a long time. He simply watched the door, relearning the shape of his own emptiness now that he had seen its cause. His world was one of oaths and blood, of territory and debt. When she had left, vanishing from their penthouse suite with nothing but a note that said, "I can't," it was a debt he could never collect, a betrayal that had no honor code to address it. He had told his men to stop searching after the first year. He had told himself he had let her go. He was a liar. That was when he saw the second man. Nondescript, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit his shoulders, pretending to look at a display of wind chimes. But his eyes never left the door Naomi had entered. He was Ishikawagumi. Kaido knew the look. The hungry, impatient stillness of a scavenger. A cold, surgical certainty settled over Kaido. This was not a coincidence. He crossed the street. He moved like the pavement owed him space, each step deliberate. He entered the shop below the atelier, a place that sold handmade paper, the bell above the door announcing his arrival with a delicate, mocking chime. Through the thin floorboards, he could hear faint, measured footsteps. Hers. He bought a sheet of black paper, his hands steady, his mind a cold engine of calculation. When he stepped back outside, the Ishikawa dog was still there, now lighting a cigarette with a telltale tremor in his hand. Amateur. Kaido waited. An hour passed. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. When Naomi finally emerged, the portfolio case was gone. She locked the door to the atelier, her movements unhurried. The man across the street dropped his cigarette, grinding it out with his heel. He started to follow her as she walked toward the train station. Kaido let him get half a block. Then he moved. He didn't run. He simply closed the distance with a predatory economy of motion. He came up behind the man, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. "Ishikawa," Kaido said, his voice a low vibration. It was not a question. The man froze, every muscle in his body going rigid. He turned slowly, the color draining from his face, his eyes wide with the terror of a rat cornered by a python. He recognized Kaido instantly. Recognition was always the first stage of death in his presence. "Tanaka-sama," the man stammered, his hand twitching toward his jacket. "Don't," Kaido advised, the word as cold and final as a morgue slab. He took a step closer, invading the man's space, his height, and the absolute stillness of his fury of physical pressure. "Why are you following her?"
"No instructions."
"Just to watch." Kaido's eyes flickered past him, down the street. Naomi had stopped, her head tilted as if she'd heard something. She was looking back. Her eyes met his over the Ishikawa soldier's shoulder. For a second, her expression was blank with confusion. Then, recognition dawned, and it was not peace that filled her face, but a stark, profound horror. Her hand flew to her mouth. That was the moment everything changed. Her seeing him, her knowing he had found her. The quiet life she had built was a house of cards, and he was the coming storm. Whose instructions? Kaido pressed, his attention never leaving Naomi's terrified face. The man swallowed. Ishikawa himself. He heard a rumor that she was back in Tokyo.
So,
The old dog had not forgotten. Kaido's gaze hardened. He reached out, not with violence, but with a chilling gentleness, and adjusted the lapel of the man's ill-fitting suit. "You will go back to your master," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You will tell him you saw nothing. You found a ghost. A dead end. Do you understand?" The man nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. "Go."
he didn't need to be told twice.
He scrambled away, practically tripping over his own feet in his haste to disappear. And then it was just the two of them, separated by 30 feet of asphalt and 3 years of silence. Naomi hadn't moved. She stood frozen, a silhouette against the garish glow of a noodle shop sign. He started walking toward her, closing the distance. Each step was an accusation. Each step was a reclamation. When he reached her, he stopped a foot away. He could smell her skin, a faint scent of turpentine and something else, something that was just her. It was a scent he thought he had purged from his memory. He had failed. "Kaido," she breathed, her voice rough, unused. He looked down at her. He catalogued the changes. The new lines of exhaustion around her eyes. The strength in her jaw that wasn't there before. She had survived him. She had survived without him. The thought did not please him. It enraged him. "You have been followed," he stated. There was no room for denial. Her eyes darted down the street where the other man had vanished. "For how long?" "Does it matter?" he countered, his voice flat, devoid of the inferno raging inside him. "They know you are here, which means you are a liability. To me." She flinched as if he had struck her. "I didn't," she started, then stopped. What was there to say? "I didn't mean to be found. I didn't want you to know I existed." "You are coming with me," he said.
It was not a request.
It was the reassertion of an old and absolute authority. "No," she said, taking a step back. Her chin came up. That was the woman he remembered. The one who could stand in a room full of his soldiers and not show an ounce of fear.
No, Kaito.
"I won't. You can't." He took a step forward, erasing the space she had tried to create. He was close enough now to feel the heat radiating from her skin. "I can," he said softly, the words a silken threat. "And I will. Your quiet little life is over, Naomi. It ended the moment I saw you. It ended the moment they saw you." He leaned in, his voice dropping lower still, meant only for her. "You do not have a choice." He saw the fight in her eyes, the desperate calculation. She was looking for an escape, an angle, but there was none. There was only him, a wall of tailored black wool and unbreakable will. The street was empty now, the last of the evening commuters having scurried home. It was just them, under the watchful eye of a paper lantern, the past a hungry ghost between them. She was trapped. She knew it. He saw the moment of surrender, the slight slump of her shoulders, the extinguishing of the defiant spark in her gaze. He reached out, and his fingers brushed her wrist. Her skin was warm.
Alive.
A jolt went through him, a current of possession so strong it was dizzying. "You're not leaving me again." The penthouse was exactly as she remembered, a tomb of glass and steel overlooking the glittering expanse of Shinjuku. It was sterile, impersonal, a monument to a man who valued control above all else. Nothing of her remained. No books left on a table, no throw blanket over the arm of the severe leather sofa, no hint of her perfume in the air. The silence was the loudest thing in the room, thick with 3 years of unsaid words. Kaido stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, a dark silhouette against the city lights. He hadn't spoken since they'd entered the private elevator in the building's basement. "Why were they watching me, Kaido?" Naomi finally asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She would not let him see her crumble. He turned slowly. In the dim light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, his eyes unreadable. Ishikawa is old, he said, his voice a low rumble. And he has a long memory. When you left, it was a message to my enemies. That I could not hold on to what was mine. That I had a weakness. So this is about your pride? She shot back, a spark of her old fire returning. A muscle jumped in his jaw. This is about survival. He walked toward the bar, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into a heavy crystal glass. He did not offer her one. Shortly after you disappeared, Ishikawa's men ambushed my convoy. A test. To see how I would respond, he paused, swirling the amber liquid. My second-in-command, Saito, was in the lead car. He was my father's most loyal man. He taught me everything. Naomi felt a chill snake down her spine. She remembered Saito, a kind, older man with laugh lines around his eyes who had always treated her with a gentle respect that was jarringly out of place in their world. They didn't just kill him, Kaito continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper of pure ice. They sent me his hands. It was a message. For the shame you caused me, a debt of blood was paid. Saito paid it. The air left her lungs. This was his wound. The shame he carried. He saw her departure not just as a personal betrayal, but as the catalyst for the death of a man who was like a brother to him. He believed she had handed his enemy the knife. I didn't know, she whispered, the words tasting like ash. What would you have done if you did? He asked, his eyes pinning her from across the room. Written a letter of condolence. The cruelty of it was meant to wound. And it did. But underneath it, she heard something else. A deep, tectonic grief. He was blaming her because it was easier than blaming himself. I left to protect you, she said, her voice gaining strength. The lie she had told herself for 3 years suddenly felt like the truest thing she had ever said. I knew I was a target. I heard the whispers. I saw the way they looked at me. I was the foreigner, the outsider, the chink in your armor. If I stayed, they would have used me to get to you. So I took myself off the board. He laughed, a short, ugly sound with no humor in it. You think running away protected me? Your absence was the wound they poured salt in. Every day, for 3 years. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping directly in front of her. He put his glass down on a marble side table with a sharp click. The scent of him, sandalwood, whiskey, and something cold and metallic like the city itself, enveloped her. He was too close, his presence a physical force. You made a choice for me, he said, his voice dangerously soft. You decided I was not strong enough to protect what was mine. You dishonored me more than any enemy ever could. He raised a hand, and she flinched, bracing for a blow that didn't come. Instead, his fingers brushed her cheek, a touch so light it was almost imaginary. But it burned like a brand. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. His eyes searched hers, looking for what? The woman he married? The woman who left. I could have kept you safe, he murmured, and the raw conviction in his voice was terrifying. It was the absolute belief of a king who discovers a flaw in his kingdom and will burn the world to correct it. She should have been afraid. A part of her was. But another, deeper part, a part she had tried to starve for 3 years, recognized the truth. He would have torn Tokyo apart for her. He would have drowned the streets in blood to keep her safe. And that was the problem. That was why she had to leave. No, she said, her voice shaking but firm. You would have destroyed everything to keep me, including yourself. His hand dropped away. The space between them crackled with a tension that was more intimate than any touch.
He saw it then.
Not fear, not regret, but a terrible, sad certainty. She had left not because she was weak, but because she believed he was. That was a blow his pride could not withstand. The silence was broken by the shrill ring of a burner phone he'd left on the bar. He turned, his movements stiff, and answered it. He listened, his face impassive, but a new coldness entered his eyes. Where, he said. He listened again. I'm on my way. He hung up and looked at her. That was my man outside your atelier. the Ishikagumi paid it a visit. Naomi's blood ran cold. My work.
They didn't take anything, he said.
They just left a message. They broke everything. Every piece you were working on. Every tool. They slashed the canvases. Her studio. Her quiet, meticulous world of mending broken things. They had shattered it. It was a violation so profound it left her breathless. It was a move that directly targeted her, not just him. This is what happens when you are in my world, Naomi, he said, his voice devoid of any sympathy. It was a clinical statement of fact. Everything you touch, everything you try to build, will be turned to ash. He grabbed a set of keys from a bowl on the console. We are moving you.
Now.
The ambush came in the parking garage. It was brutally efficient. A black sedan screeched around a concrete pillar, blocking their exit. Another hemmed them in from behind. Men in dark suits spilled out, guns drawn. Kaito's reaction was instantaneous. He was not a man. He was a machine built for violence. Before Naomi could even process the threat, he had shoved her down, his body a shield over hers, the hard lines of his tailored suit pressing into her back. Stay down, he commanded, his voice a calm, lethal growl in her ear. The world erupted in a cacophony of gunfire and shattering glass. The air filled with the acrid smell of cordite. Kaito moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. He drew a pistol from inside his jacket, a seamless, economical motion. He didn't waste bullets. 2 shots, precise and controlled. A man fell. Another. It was like choreography, a deadly dance he had perfected over a lifetime. A bullet ricocheted off the car door inches from her head, whining past her ear. A primal scream built in her throat, but she choked it down. Panic was a luxury. She crawled backward on instinct, seeking better cover behind the engine block. She saw one of the Ishikawa men aiming at Kaito from his blind spot. There was no time to think, no time to scream a warning. She acted. Her hand closed around a heavy wrench left on the floor by a mechanic. With a surge of adrenaline, she threw it, a clumsy, desperate arc. It struck the gunman's arm. His shot went wide, shattering a light fixture overhead and plunging their section of the garage into flickering semi-darkness. The distraction was all Kaito needed. He pivoted, fired once. The threat was neutralized. The entire firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. Then, silence, broken only by the tinkling of broken glass and the distant wail of a city siren. Kaito was instantly at her side, grabbing her arm, pulling her to her feet. Are you hurt? He demanded, his eyes scanning her with a frantic intensity that betrayed the calm he had just displayed. No, she managed, her voice a raw whisper. You? He ignored the question, his jaw tight. He was already pulling her toward the stairwell, his grip on her arm bruising. He didn't let go, not even for a second, as they took the stairs 2 at a time to a different level where another of his cars was waiting. The new safe house was a traditional home in a walled compound in Azabu, a stark contrast to the modern penthouse. Here, the walls were paper, the floors were tatami, and the air smelled of cypress wood and old secrets. It was more of a prison than the other place had ever been. Later, after his men had given their reports and the perimeter was secured, he found her in the garden. She was staring at a stone lantern, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold her own splintering world together. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. You saved my life, he said from behind her. She didn't turn. You saved mine first. He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the residual tension humming off him. Why did you do it? The wrench. It was a risk. It was an instinct, she corrected him. I didn't think. You never do, he said, but there was no heat in it. It was a statement of fact, a weary acknowledgement of her impulsive, decisive nature, the very nature that had made her leave him. She finally looked at him. How do we make them stop, Kaito? His gaze was heavy. To make them stop, we have to know their next move. And for that, I need something from you, he paused. When you disappeared, you had help. Someone built your new identity, wiped your records. gave you a new life. I need a name. Naomi's heart sank. A man named Mr. Chin. A quiet, older man who ran a small import-export business and dealt in secrets on the side. He had helped her out of a sense of obligation to her former mentor, the only person she had confided in when she planned her escape. Contacting him would mean betraying that trust, pulling him into this mess. It meant burning the last bridge to the life she had built. It meant choosing Kaido's world, irrevocably. She saw the question in his eyes. He wasn't just asking for a name. He was asking for her allegiance. She looked away from him, at the perfectly raked gravel of the garden. The stones were arranged in patterns of waves, frozen in place.
Permanent.
Unchanging. Just like his world. Just like the man standing next to her. She had crossed a line in that garage. She had picked up a weapon, however crude, and entered the fight. There was no going back. His name is Chun, she said, her voice quiet but clear. And he will only talk to me. The phone call felt like a betrayal. Naomi's voice was smooth, practiced, as she lied to the old man who had given her a second chance at life. She told him she needed a favor for a friend, a bit of information on shipping manifests. Mr. Chin, ever trusting, agreed. The information he provided was innocuous on its own, but when fed into the intelligence machine of Kaido's organization, it painted a clear picture. The Ishikawagumi were planning to intercept a shipment of priceless antiquities belonging to Kaido's clan, a collection that had been in his family for generations. It was more than a business move. It was an attack on his legacy. Kaido stood by the window, listening to her conversation, his expression unreadable. When she hung up, the silence was heavy. She had just willingly committed a morally gray act, sacrificing a piece of her own integrity for his war. She had crossed a line she could not uncross. That night, sleep was impossible. She found him in the main room, sitting in the near darkness, staring at a single scroll painting on the wall. It was a 16th century piece she had once helped restore, a landscape of a lone fisherman on a vast, misty lake. I destroyed a man's trust for you today, she said, her voice cutting through the quiet. He didn't look at her. His eyes remained on the scroll. He will be compensated. And protected. That's not the point. You ask for a piece of my soul, like you're asking for a cup of tea. He finally turned his head, his gaze meeting hers in the gloom. I rebuilt this entire empire after you left, he said, his voice low and raw. Made it stronger. Colder. Absolute. But seeing you, it's the only wound that never scarred over. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. An admission of a fatal flaw he could not fix, a weakness he could not cauterize. The honesty of it disarmed her. I didn't leave you, she said, the words tumbling out, the truth she had hidden even from herself. I left the woman I was becoming with you. I was hard. I was cold. I saw a man disrespect you, and I felt nothing when your soldiers took him away. I was afraid of her. I was afraid she would get you killed because she would have encouraged the worst parts of you. That was the moment one of them almost lost the other, not to a bullet, but to the crushing weight of the truth. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as the wife who had abandoned him, but as someone who had seen the monster in him and had tried to save him from it. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A single text message. His face hardened as he read it, the moment of vulnerability gone, replaced by a mask of cold fury. What is it? She asked. They're not going after the shipment, he said, his voice tight. That was a feint. They went back to your atelier. They took one thing. The Empress's tears vase you were restoring. Naomi felt sick. The vase was a national treasure, a delicate piece of porcelain from the Ming dynasty. But it was more than that. It was a gift to Kaido's great-grandmother, a symbol of his family's honor. They sent a demand, Kaido said, his voice deadly calm. A trade. The vase for a meeting. With me. And you will be the one to deliver their terms. The exchange was set for the Tokyo National Museum after hours. The Ishikawagumi had chosen the location for its cruel poetry, a place of preserved history to witness the end of Kaido's reign. His men were in position, ghosts in the empty galleries, But Kaido knew this was about more than tactical superiority. It was about humiliation. Naomi stood in the grand hall, the soaring ceilings amplifying the chilling silence. She wore a simple black dress, and in her hands, she carried a small, leather satchel. Kaido had wanted her to stay behind, locked away and safe. She had refused. "This started with me," she'd said. "I will be there when it ends." Ishikawa appeared, flanked by two of his heaviest soldiers. He was a small, withered man, but his eyes held the cold fire of a zealot. He smiled, a reptilian stretching of thin lips. "The runaway wife returns," he hissed. "Come to watch your husband die." "I came to deliver a message," Naomi said, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "First, the vase," Ishikawa demanded, gesturing to a pedestal where the Empress's tears stood, beautiful and fragile under a single spotlight. This was the moment. Kaido was watching from the shadows of a nearby exhibit. His plan was to let them get close, to create an opening. But Naomi had her own plan. She had spent the last day not just in fear, but in thought, using the one weapon that was uniquely hers, her knowledge. She walked toward the pedestal, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She opened her satchel. Instead of a weapon, she pulled out a small glass jar filled with a clear liquid and a fine hairbrush. It was a specialized solvent, a chemical she used to remove old, discolored varnish from priceless artifacts. To the untrained eye, it was harmless. "The glaze on this piece is famously unstable," she said, her voice calm and academic, as if delivering a lecture. "Especially at the neck, where a hairline fracture was repaired in the 1920s with a resin that is highly susceptible to acetone-based solvents." She dipped the brush in the jar. Ishikawa's eyes narrowed, confused. "What are you doing?" "I am choosing which pieces are worth saving," she replied. With a steady hand, she reached out and painted a single, deliberate stroke of the solvent across the vase's delicate neck. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a network of fine cracks appeared, spreading like black lightning across the porcelain. With a faint, crystalline sigh, the top of the Empress's tears vase fractured, slid sideways, and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent hall. Ishikawa screamed in rage. It was the diversion. In that moment of shock and chaos, Kaido's men moved. The ensuing fight was short, brutal, and decisive. Kaido himself dispatched Ishikawa's guards with surgical precision, his movements a blur of dark violence. He cornered the old man against a display case of samurai armor, the ghosts of ancient warriors bearing witness. It was over. In the aftermath, amidst the wreckage of a priceless artifact and the quiet groans of the defeated, Kaido walked over to Naomi. He looked from her face to the shattered porcelain on the floor. The cost was absolute. She had destroyed a piece of his history, a piece of her own professional soul, to save him. He reached out and touched her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. His touch was not possessive, but something else. Something akin to awe. "You destroyed something beautiful to save me." She met his gaze, unflinching. "It was already broken," she said. "I just chose which pieces were worth saving."
He said her name then.
Naomi. It wasn't the clipped, commanding tone he usually used.
It was a vow.
It held 3 years of anger, a night of terror, and the dawning of a future he would never again let go of. He understood. She had not left because she thought he was weak. She had left because she knew his strength, and she was afraid of what it would make of them both. And in her own way, she was just as strong, just as ruthless. She was his equal. They returned to the penthouse. The city lights glittered below, a sprawling kingdom of infinite dangers and possibilities. Kaido stood behind her as she looked out the window, his presence a tangible weight, a brand on the air around her.
He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't need to.
The choice had already been made in a hail of gunfire and a cloud of chemical solvent. "They will never stop hunting us," he said, his voice a low promise against the glass. "What's left of the Ishikawa-gumi will regroup. Others will see this as an opportunity." Naomi didn't turn. She continued to watch the vast, dangerous city that was now their cage and their throne. The life of quiet restoration was gone forever, shattered as completely as the Empress's tears. But she was not the same woman who had run 3 years ago. She had not been rescued. She had entered the war and fired the decisive shot. "Let them try," she said. The silence that followed was not empty. It was an oath, sealed in violence and sealed with a choice. It was the sound of a new and terrible beginning.